Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am going to be talking about 12 historical fiction books or series that I am planning to read in the next kind of year or two. For some reason, I've been really getting back into historical fiction. I used to love history when I was younger. It was my favorite subject at school. I've always been one of those people that has a history book on tap just because I love learning about new cultures, periods of time, time periods that I just don't really know much about. I just love learning about the kind of very human experience when, things were really tough. And I also just love learning about, countries and religions and kind of different things, different people. I'm just a very curious person, so I literally just latch onto something and I just want to learn the history about that entire thing. But I kind of went through a little bit of a lull, I would say, over the last couple of years. I haven't read tons of historical fiction, but recently I've been really getting into Japanese history. I really love Japanese culture. It's a culture that I really deeply respect, and a lot of the values in Japanese culture align a lot with my own personal values, interestingly enough. I think there's a lot of commonalities between South Asian, Southeast Asian, even kind of Middle Eastern, even African actually, like cultures. There are actually a lot of similarities between them. And so I was reading a lot about a samurai and the kind of political goings on that were happening in Japan in the kind of 15th and 16th century. And so that kind of spurred my brain to kind of go back into that world. Because of that, I ended up buying a bunch of Japanese fiction books, historical fiction books. I'm actually reading one right now called Musashi by Eiji Yoshikawa, and I am loving it. It is a 1,000 plus page book, but it is honestly phenomenal. And I'm not gonna say it with 100% conviction, but I actually think this might become my favorite book of all time. Even more so than The Three Musketeers, folks, which don't tell Dumas. Dumas is turning in his grave right now, but it's phenomenal. And because I've been enjoying learning about the history so much, I've been watching documentaries, reading things online. I have a few Japanese history books too, so I've been reading through those and watching interviews and just, really immersing myself in the kind of country's history and culture. And so I ended up doing a little bit of research, and that kind of spurred on my desire to just read more books, more historical fiction books, just beyond Japanese fiction. So quite a few of these will be Japanese fiction, but there's a little bit of a mix, and I'm really excited to get back into reading historical fiction books. I used to read a lot of it actually, way before I even had my YouTube channel, and I just feel like I've reconnected to a part of myself that I didn't even know that I'd lost. So I think that's pretty cool. So anyway, I've been talking way too much. Let's go into my 12 kind of books or series that I'm planning to read. The first one on my list is Shogun by James Clavell. Now this is, I think, a 6-book series. All the books are above 1,000 pages. I was actually going to read this before I read Musashi because they're actually set, I believe Shogun is set after the events of Musashi, but I ended up wanting to just read Musashi because it's just one book, even though it is over 1,000 pages long. I have the first book in the Shogun series, and my mum actually read this series when she was younger and she loved everything about it. And it's just one of those series that I know is probably going to change my life in all the best way possible, and I'm going to learn a lot from it. And for that exact reason, I cannot wait to get to it. It's just that there's 6 books of 1,200 plus pages, and guys, I don't know if I've got time for that. I think we're just gonna, I know each book has like sections, so I think I'm just gonna have to break it up. But I just can't wait. Like, I honestly cannot wait. It's probably the one that I'm most excited to get to on this list. Next on my list, we actually have a Chinese historical fiction series, and that is Legends of the Condor Heroes by Jin Yong. Came across this completely randomly as I was doing my kind of bit of research. The story is set in China during the wars between 2 of the big empires in China at the time. And there's also a really heavy focus on Genghis Khan, I believe, which is a historical figure that I'm personally very fascinated by. So I don't know much more beyond that, and I don't actually want to read much more beyond that because I want to kind of soak it in as I read the story and learn the history as I'm reading the book. It's a quartet, and it's one of those series that as I started to dig deeper into it and I looked at reviews, I just know I'm going to love it. Like, I just know it. And also the Folio Society actually have a special edition of the first book. So if I enjoyed the first book, I will definitely be purchasing that because it is a very beautiful edition. I just love the cover, and yeah, I'm excited to get to that series at some point. Next, we have a book by an author that I already mentioned, the author of Musashi, and that is Taiko by Eiji Yoshikawa. Eiji Yoshikawa's writing is absolutely stunning. His writing is just, honestly, it's changed my life. Like, it's changed my perception of good writing. Bear in mind, it is a translation, but the source material has to be good in order for the translation to be good, in my opinion. So I'm really excited to read Taiko. Now, Musashi is very character driven. It's very much focused on one individual and then like a cast of secondary characters. But Taiko is very much about empires, and there's following multiple POVs, and it's kind of very, you know, layered with all these different characters. So it's much bigger in scope than Musashi. And for that reason, I can't wait to read it, because naturally it's going to be talking about, I would say, a lot of the same themes, but through a very different lens. And I just can't wait to read Yoshikawa's writing. And man, like, he's just so talented. Like, I've literally never heard anybody talk about this guy. And it's because mostly we all read fantasy, right? But even if you like fantasy, like, I know so many of you who watch my videos and like the same books as me will love his writing. So I know they're big commitments, but honestly, it's worth it. Like, it's worth it. And I can't wait to read Taiko, because I know it's going to be incredible. The fourth one on my list is actually a recommendation from Ed from the Brothers Gwyn. I messaged him semi-recently asking him if he had a kind of definitive short list of books that I should read about the Native Americans. And he said to me, the first one that you should read is Ride the Wind by Lucius St. Clair Robson. So I bought it. Naturally, I actually bought a few on the list that he sent me. I know very little about that period of history, about the culture of the Native Americans. I just don't really know as much as I should and I would like. So I picked that up. And I picked up a few others that I'll mention in another video, because I just think it's a really important period of history that we're still living through the consequences today. And I'm just very uneducated on the topic. So I'm hoping this will educate me a bit more on the topic. And then I can also start to read a little bit more non-fiction. I tend to like to read a bit of fiction first, and then I start to branch into the non-fiction. I don't know why, it's just always the way that I've done it. The next book on my list is Silence by Shusaku Endo. This is a book about a Catholic missionary in Japan, and from what I know, it's a very heavy book, lots of heavy thematic work, quite a lot of violence, very emotionally taxing to read. But I've also heard it's very beautiful and stunning, and because it covers some very heavy themes, there's some poignant kind of lessons to learn. It's also quite a short book, if I remember correctly. But I know there was a film, a Martin Scorsese film, that was based on this book that I haven't actually read because I wanted to read the book first. So I'm really, really keen to read this book this year. I can also watch the film because I have a feeling I'm going to love it. Next on my list, we have the one that was most recommended to me. So I actually did a tweet on my Twitter asking people for historical fiction book recommendations, and this is the one that came up the most, and that is The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett? I don't know. I don't think he's French, so Follett, I'm assuming. I think he's British. This is a book, I think, set during after the death of Thomas Becket. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is. I think it was kind of set in the 12th century. I don't know tons about the Middle Ages. I know like bits of I know what happened in other parts of Europe in the Middle Ages, and I know quite a bit about the Crusades, but I don't really know tons about what was happening in England at that time. So I'm very, very keen to pick up this series. I think there's 4 or 5 books, 4 books and a novella. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I got all the books on ebook because they're pretty chunky, and yeah, I've been reading more on my tablet now. I'm starting to get used to it. I don't actually like it that much, but I'm getting more and more used to it. So I thought I would just get the ebooks because they were actually on sale. But this is and then if I do like it, I'll end up buying the physicals. But this is a series that I think, also just as a British person, I have to read, because I think the author is British, and I see these books everywhere. Like literally everywhere. Like whenever I go to a bookstore, they're always front and center. And there's also a really famous TV show based on the books that like did really well, and that's like is pretty critically acclaimed. So I just need to read it. I just need to read it. Yeah, I can't believe I haven't. I feel like it's a rite of passage at this point. Next on my list, we have Leo Africanus by Amin Malouf. Now, I don't know much about this author at all. I just know that the books are kind of very much centered on kind of Middle Eastern, North African history. That's pretty much it. I think Amin Malouf has actually written quite a few books. They tend to be quite short books, and I actually ended up getting all of their books. So I'm going to start off with Leo Africanus because I think that's their most famous book. But either way, I'm just very excited because I feel like this could potentially become a new favorite author based on what I've seen so far. And yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait. All right, we're halfway through the list. Next on my list, we have Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. Now, this is a Korean author about a Korean family, and it's a kind of multi-generational story about the kind of, I think it's about kind of like the immigrant struggle and the kind of struggle that we have when we, when we try to build success and wealth and whatnot. But from the perspective of a family that comes from a very poor background, if I recall correctly. I've heard so many positive things about this book. I've also heard some pretty not so great things about this book. I think it's one of those books that you either really love or you really don't love. And I really hope I fit into the love category because it sounds like the type of book that I would love and that I would eat up because it's ultimately just about the human struggle. And those are the types of books that I just absolutely adore. And I bought the book because I also heard that there is an Apple TV show about it, and it's got like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I trust Rotten Tomatoes, so I really want to read the book and then I will watch the show. I'm so excited. Like I'm gonna try and get to that this year. Next on my list is another series that came onto my radar because of the Brothers Gwyn, and that is Boudicca by Manda Scott. I think there's like 5 books. I actually got them all. And it's about Boudicca. I don't really know much about Boudicca as an individual, as a historical figure, but I'm all about reading about kind of powerful, interesting, compelling women, and Boudicca is that. So I'm super excited to read this. Probably not this year, maybe next year. Next on my list, we have, I mentioned Genghis Khan earlier. As a kind of historical figure that I'm personally very interested in. So I came across the Khan series by Con Iggulden, and I actually randomly found the first book brand new in a secondhand charity shop the other day, so I was super chuffed about that. But I actually do have all the books on ebook. Con Iggulden is an author that I've been really wanting to read now for ages, but I've just never really got around to him. And this is the first series of his that I'm actually going to read because I've just heard amazing things about this series. And like I said, it's about a period of history that I'm personally very interested and invested in. I can't wait to read this. I think there's 5 books in the series, pretty chunky, but very engaging, I'm sure. The penultimate one we have on my list is The Tales of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I've just heard that this is very lyrical, very poetic, quite visceral when you read this story. It's kind of like, I think, a collection of like myths and legends in kind of Japanese lore. But I could be wrong, don't quote me on that. There's so many different translations that I actually ended up buying multiple translations, and everybody says that each translation will give you something different. Some people translate everything, other people just translate certain parts of it and just end up discounting other parts of it. So I ended up buying like the 4 main translations of the book, and I'm going to give that a go because I just think it's going to be a really incredible experience, and I'm really looking forward to it. Really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be very different to all the other series in this book just because of the way that it's written. Like I think it's very poetic in nature, and yeah, I think it's going to be really cool. All right, the last one that we have on my list is The Tales of the Atari by Liane Hearn. It is a historical fantasy series based on a fictionalized version of feudal Japan, and that just sounds like something that I would eat up. The books are also really short. There's 4 of them, but they're like really tiny. I think they're all like 300 pages long. And I've just heard really great things based on what I've seen. And I've heard it's quite character centric. There's just kind of like a lot of politics, a lot of intrigue, a lot of struggle. And these are just all things that I love. And I love the fact that there's a little bit of a fantasy element to it. Not a necessity for me, but always a plus if you can include that in historical fiction. So there we have it, a bit of a mix. I mean, there's obviously a lot of other historical fiction books and series that I really want to read that I just did not include in this list. I would say these are the ones that I want to get to first, but I will probably do another list as well at some point once I've read through some of these, because there's just so much to learn, guys, and honestly I find it overwhelming sometimes. So there we have it. If you have any recommendations, please do drop them down below. I'm particularly very interested in kind of Asian, South Asian, Southeast Asian, African, North African, Middle Eastern, those kind of historical fiction books. But I'm open to anything, honestly. Like I'm really open. I'd love to learn more about kind of South American culture and history as well. If you have any of those racks, let me know. But otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Stay safe, everybody. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye.